let me at least pursue a chance to do this for a living, even though I knew, based on the experiences that I'd had and the way the world was, that you may not be able to make a living. But I said, it is worth trying.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Today's guest is hilarious, inspiring, motivating, and super interesting. All-round good bloke, Phil LaMarr joins me today. He has over 600 credits. That is wild. Nothing more needs to be said. Bonkers. It's crazy. Well done to Phil. I love Phil's resilience and moving forward mindset. We dive into a few situations where, despite the challenges and environments that were slow to change, Phil still found a way to move forward and incorporate play and gratitude into his framework. It's a rare outlook, and it's incredibly inspiring and contagious. He also has a beautiful outlook on life and how everything ties together. It's crazy to hear how some of his experiences have led to better opportunities in the future. It's quite chilling. We also get to hear from some of his most famous voices, which was awesome to hear. Okay, let's get into it. Phil LaMarr is an actor, improviser, and writer, and is perhaps best known as one of the original cast members of Mad TV, the voice of Samurai Jack, Hermes on Futurama, Static on Static Shock, Green Lantern on Justice League, and Marvin in Pulp Fiction. For over 30 years, Phil has thrilled audiences with his work on camera and behind the mic on TV shows such as Family Guy, Young Justice, Star Wars, The Clone Wars, Star Trek Lower Decks, The Flash, Supergirl, Get Shorty, Lucifer, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Veep. Some of his feature films include Madagascar 2, Incredibles 2, and The Lion King, and video games including Jak Daxter, Fortnite, Shadow of Mordor, and the Metal Gear Solid, Injustice, and Mortal Kombat series. Phil also performs monthly on stage with The Black Version, performing on screen in Hamster Gretel, the Craig of the Creek movie, Invincible, Mulligan's, AMC Cooper's Bar, a new season of Futurama on HULU, and performing the role of Sherlock Holmes in Audible series Moriarty. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about the courage to walk one's path, old school thinking, Futurama, Mad TV, improv, his many voices, when shows come back, gratitude towards the fans, rejection, value of your art, Pulp Fiction, and paving the way. Before we get into this epic chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny in Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out at 3:30 Melbourne, Australian time, with the full video of the podcast to be released the following day. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's get into it. I always like to talk about people that inspire you or motivate you or that has helped someone in their career or life. And I found this person. I don't know much about this person, but I know that this person's inspired you. Could you tell me what Carol Dudley has helped you with in your life?
Actually, that was interesting because I just had a brief interaction with Carol Dudley when I had before I began my show business career. She was a casting director, and I worked as an intern for her one summer during college. And this turned out later on, when I decided to pursue the professional show business world, it gave me a great perspective to watch someone. This is back in the 1980s, and this woman was smart, heartfelt, caring, and quality oriented, which back in the 80s, not everyone in show business. Well, there's a reason they call it show business, not show art.
Yeah. Okay.
Because most people are focused on the work, the money. How do I succeed? As opposed to art. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci was never sitting there going, let me paint a woman with dark hair that I can sell for more.
Exactly.
No, it was about expressing what was inside of him through his paint. And that is what art is.
Agreed. Isn't that wonderful that at such a young age you get to see this person, although brief, teaches you a lesson about quality, because it's not about quantity. Obviously, you've done a lot of quantity jobs in your career, but teaching you the quality aspect that you're going to be there, you're going to do the best that you can. And to me, that's a very strong base, because if you don't have that, I don't think one would survive in the business for as long as you, or thrive in the business as long as you. I feel like that would really carry you on for the rest of your life, whether you consciously think about it or it's there subconsciously. Do you feel like that? Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you may have already heard the story I told once of working for Carol Dudley and watching her do casting for this very run-of-the-mill, hour-long network cop drama show. And the producers, directors were all old TV people. And they were just making an old TV show. And this was before diversity and representation were buzzwords the way they are now. And we were casting a part of a army colonel who was being talked to by the detective on the show. And Carol brought in men of various ethnicities, which back in the 80s, you never saw on network television. Wait, you have an Asian man playing a military person and a black man, and the actors that she brought in were really, really good. But of course, the producers looked right past their quality and hired the edgy white guy who came in with his own military hat because he looked like an army guy on TV, even though he wasn't the best actor. And it was interesting to see that happen and go, oh, there is someone in show business who cares about the quality of acting, but not everyone. And casting, I learned as an actor, it's not just about you. It is about what's in the decision makers' heads. But you have to do your best. But that best won't necessarily change their problems.
It's a very obviously important lesson that you learned, mostly for the wrong reasons from the other end, if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I'm not in that experience, but putting myself in your shoes, if that's healthy, I don't know. How do you not stay jaded by an experience like that when you know that there's a whole bunch of people making decision making, and we have it from all areas? This one's an extreme example. How do you not go screw this, I don't want to be a part of this, this is a disgusting industry, low consciousness, these people don't know what they're doing? Or is it because you see someone like Carol who goes, there are actually some good people and I can see it moving forward? What's kind of the thinking at that stage?
Well, it was a couple of years later that after graduating college from Yale University, coming home to Los Angeles, I had to decide whether to pursue acting. And you're absolutely right. That experience could have made me decide, no, this is not for you. You won't get jobs just like the African-American guy at that casting session didn't get a job. But you're right. The existence of Carol Dudley gave a sense of hope. Because what those men were doing and that lack of diversity, that was just what in the States back then was considered the norm.
Yeah.
But things change. And fortunately, in a few years after I began working in the 90s, things changed again. And, well, because when a bunch of new networks began, the Fox network, the UPN network, these, because when I was growing up in the States, there were only 3 channels that created shows. But then it opened up. And in the late 80s, early 90s, a bunch of these new networks decided, if we put on a black show, all of the black viewers will come to our network right away.
money.
And so you had a big raise in terms of the number of opportunities for actors who looked like me, much more than what I grew up watching.
Yeah. It's great that happened. It may not be the best intention, but at least we're moving forward. It's funny how funny is probably not the right word. But I still think it's very important, well, at least on my end, to see, like, yes, look, we're only going at like a base level. There's obviously horrible things that have happened. Also, mentally, you have to go through a lot just to know that this is out there. And I want to go to your drive, because I know that when you came out of Yale, I think you were pursuing acting for a year. It wasn't going to the plan, and you almost decided to leave acting. I'd love to know what kept you going forward, because I'm getting a theme here. You've got a strong will.
Well, I decided to pursue an acting career because since high school, I had been performing and I enjoyed it. I did plays, as a little nerdy boy. And then in college, I performed plays and started an improv comedy group and got a great sense of community.
Nice.
And so I began to pursue acting because, I enjoy that work, but I also enjoy this village. So let me at least pursue a chance to do this for a living, even though I knew, based on the experiences that I'd had and the way the world was, that you may not be able to make a living. But I said, it is worth trying, because here I either have to try for this thing that I enjoy doing now, or I can wait till my mid-40s or mid-50s when I hit a midlife crisis and, let me do something I like. Maybe I'll shave my beard and try to do acting.
Yeah.
But I said, no.
Nice.
Don't wait 20 years. Do it now.
Very, very wise of you. And even to know that there's a potential uphill battle, a lot of hurdles, but to still push ahead, not comparing whatsoever. I used to be an accountant, and I looked, you're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I know. I actually worked in it, not for long. It was under a year. And I had a similar realization to you in the sense of, what do I want my life to be? This does not feel right. I don't feel like I'm being me. I feel like I'm a shell of myself. I don't feel like I'm bursting. I felt like a depression in the soul. Like everything was going well. I was fine, but I just knew I wasn't achieving potentially my purpose or my joy or my bliss, however you want to call it. And then when I made that decision, has it been easy? No, but I could never go back. I love doing this. I've also been doing screenwriting, and look, we don't know what's in store for the future, but I'm so proud of myself that I've allowed that decision to happen. And it takes a lot of courage. And I bring this up on more podcasts than not, but I think it'll resonate with you. I had this lady on this podcast. She's a international best-selling author, Bronnie Ware. She wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And she would essentially, I think she was a palliative care nurse, and she would interview people of sound mind that were about to pass, about to die. And the number one regret was, I wish I lived the life that I wanted to live and not the life I thought others wanted me to live. And when I read that, I thought that was mind-blowing in the sense that we all can conform to different degrees. but to have that courage to do your own thing is a very rare trait in this world. And especially at that time, I just find it so amazing that you did that. So what was your family thinking when you've gone to Yale, you've gone to one of the best universities, and you want to do this acting thing? We've said all the negatives of potentially going around. Was there a lot of worry? How did you push ahead? Did you get the support? What was going on?
I was very lucky because even though I'm from LA, people tend to think, oh, everyone in your family is in Hollywood, right? No. Nobody in my family was ever in arts or in show business, but they did. My parents, my extended family did support the things that I did, which I don't know if this is necessarily the current generation, but for the previous generation, I have so many friends who tell these stories about when they told their dad they wanted to pursue acting or major in acting, said, "What? No. Man, let that be your B story. You've got to have a real job." Because, the previous generation, that was the mindset, that you didn't pick just something you liked. You picked the best job. What's the biggest company in our town? Work for them.
Yep.
And I think maybe that's the reason that work is a 4-letter word. Because for these previous generations, it was not about enjoyment.
Yep.
It was do what you have to do. But my parents were very supportive, and I got lucky.
Well, credit to your parents for seeing a holistic long-term outlook, because even if for example, I'm not a parent, but even if someone's doing the wrong thing and potentially there's a bit of an uphill fight and you say, don't do it, you're just creating more drama. You have to be supportive in your own way. So, maybe they were more tactical and they're like secretly hoping that you would do something else. But I think it's really, really wise to acknowledge that and see that.
It's also difficult for people to support things they do not understand.
Exactly. Because it's a completely foreign concept. I know for my family who are extremely supportive, they've come from South Africa, for example, and there's a long lineage of moving. And so they've been extremely supportive, but it's like, what is this screenwriting thing? What is a podcast? And
right.
I'm very lucky that I've had the support, but I would say more often than not on this podcast, almost 250 episodes, it hasn't quite been like that. And I think it's credit to people that despite that, if they're following maybe an internal knowing, to still push ahead. So when you're at Yale, did you know that you were acting was the thing? When did you realize, I'm actually going to pursue this? Was there a plan B?
Well, it was sort of a subtext. All of the colleges that I applied to were colleges that had acting reputations. USC in California, Northwestern University in Chicago, Carnegie Mellon University, which had a conservatory in Pennsylvania, and Yale. But initially, it came down to deciding whether to go. I got into the Carnegie Mellon Acting Conservatory program, which was a very serious acting. It's like, oh, well, I can go there and in 4 years, I will be an actor. Or I can go to Yale and just have a college experience. And that is the decision I wound up making. And it turned out that Yale's reputation for drama was its graduate program, not the undergraduate program. And at the time I was there, the undergraduate program, their theater studies, not drama, not acting department. It's like, theater studies? Are you training people to be reviewers and critics? They had 2 full-time faculty members.
Whoa.
And I remember thinking about, oh my God, if my mother's paying this much tuition, I need to have a different major. I'm going to be an English major. they have their own building and, endowment chairs.
Endowment chairs. What were you thinking at the moment? Because, you've made a pretty courageous decision. I assume you can get into a lot of colleges. And then you get there in that moment, you're like, uh-oh, this isn't quite the drama that I wanted. I can't tell my mum this costs so much. What are you thinking at the moment? I would be like shaky and panicky. Or did you just go with the flow?
I just went with the flow. Well, the experience of the university was a really good experience in terms of the education, where we were, the different people. I mean, at an Ivy League school back then, it was a little wacky because you had the top percentage of all of these different high schools all come together, and half the top 10% were now the bottom 50%. If you had 23 people who were the editor of their high school newspaper, only one of them got to be the editor of the college newspaper.
That is very competitive and scary. You embrace that?
Mm-hmm. But what I found was it was also moving from Los Angeles to the eastern coast of the States and being in buildings that are 300 years old. In LA, you're excited when a 7-Eleven is more than 7 years old. Wow, this has been here since 4th grade. But what wound up happening to make the experience the best was that undergraduate Yale had extracurricular theater. They have these 12 residential colleges, and each of them has a drama club. So there are basically tons of plays going on every semester. And so the part I experienced in high school of being in a play, being part of a show, being with a group of people, that continued.
Nice.
Because I wound up doing like 3 plays a semester. And after freshman year, one of my friends who I'd done plays with came back my sophomore year after spending a summer in Chicago. And he said, got a bunch of his acting friends together and said, "Hey, buddies, I spent summer doing improv in Chicago. I really liked it. Why don't we do improv? Let's start an improv group."
Oh, that's how you started it. Oh, crazy.
Yeah, just randomly, because I had a friend from Chicago who I had done a Woody Allen play with. He introduced this idea, and we all jumped into it. And being introduced to the concept of improvisation at the age of 19 changed my life.
Oh, I've only done improv classes. I love them. I speak about improv all the time, especially for someone who is not a professional by any means. Tell me about, because there's so much, we can talk about this. I won't derail it for the people that aren't as obsessed with it as me. What was it about the yes and that potentially changed your worldview?
Well, coming out of taking drama classes where you're taught that the heart of drama is conflict. And it's all about auditioning, competition. Will you get the part? Maybe not. But then when you get into this improv concept of yes and, it is art as collaboration, as teamwork. You are on stage with your scene partner, and you two are working together to help each other. They say something, you listen, and you add to it. Yes, and then they add to what you realize that this is a very positive, collaborative approach to performance.
And life.
It's not, yes, that's the thing. At 19, I realized this is not just about comedy. This is a life philosophy. Make your partner look good. Work together. And also, the experience with the audience is a different, because the audience is part of the show. They are not just there to watch and judge you. You know how some people have that fear of being up in front of a crowd. But in improv, you're not in front. You're just, they're there, you're here, we're all together. Plus, for the audience, the improv has a sort of sports aspect because they know the actors don't know what they're going to say next. So when you come to your favorite sports team event, you don't know if they're going to win, but you're there to root for them. And that's how an improv audience is.
It's such a crazy concept. I didn't know about it until about maybe 5 years ago, maybe longer. And I could comfortably say it changed my life in that when I first started, I had no performance background. I was maybe doing my podcast and screenwriting. I'm not sure. I'd never done a play. And I got up there. I'm in the wrong, I know, but I've learned. I thought I had to be the funniest. I wasn't a team player. I'm not sure I was deliberately shutting down people, but I just thought I needed to be funny. And then I actually failed a class, and that was a big eye-opener for me. And it's probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And then through that experience is I can be funny if I make the other person funnier than me. I don't need to be high status. It is, and it's also what I do with this podcast as well. And in my screenwriting, it's letting everyone share in the fun. I get all the slice of the pie. This is anyway, it's a massive collaboration. It's something that I didn't get as an accountant necessarily. And it just to see people where they might not be that confident or funny, but when they get up on stage, maybe it's 1 out of 10 scenes, and you just see the light bulb click, and you just see this channeling of just a wonderful, creative, hilarious endeavor was the best thing ever to see people transform. I loved it. It's so unbelievable. And I'm so happy that I had my experience of not being good, and I'm probably not good anymore, but that made me appreciate it more. So I feel like you've done this. Not only have you realized the power of collaboration and teamwork, but it will also give you a bit of community as well and help you with this career to move forward. Is that what was going on in the background?
Yes. Well, and it's interesting because what you were just describing applies to the idea that these improv thoughts, philosophies, approaches aren't just about performance. I mean, one of my friends who was in my college improv group, she went on to create, after graduation, create a company called Improv Edge, where she teaches company employees in various businesses how these improv concepts help you as a worker.
So good. Great idea.
I mean, think about that. If that was the approach for everything, even from medicine to automobile, creation, make your partner look good. Take in what your coworker says and add to it. Those concepts apply positively to anything. And that's why it helps create such a great sense of community among performers. I
have this philosophy where if you succeed, I succeed, and vice versa. If you're in my sphere, if, for example, one of my friends gets, I don't know, he's the star of a sitcom and I have nothing to do with it, I still succeed. I'm in that sphere. We've worked together. We've had conversation that radiates. And we live it. Some people live in a lack of abundance mindset. And I think it's so wonderful. Even as an accountant, if you just share it with the idea, you rise up together. I never quite understood it. I think we're doing a lot better as a society, but that's always been one of my philosophies in how we kind of change the world, because not only are you changing the partner, you're creating a better atmosphere or arena for your peers or people around you. And that's why improv's so good, because as you've said, and also your friend who's created this business, it would actually improve morale and teamwork, and you want to work with someone. And we do see so often where it's mine and we hold it in. I don't want to give it to anyone else. I don't think that's where we are going to thrive as a human race. So big words I put out there, but I think it is really important. And I've gone on these rants before, improv to be taught at school. It doesn't need to be for comedy. It doesn't need to be for acting, but just getting to work with someone, especially people you don't know and you might not even like. It'd be so beautiful. Anyway, that's my rant. We just saved the world. Congratulations. You can do the TED Talks with me. I'm also thinking now going, we've spoken about the highs of improv. I know that you did Groundlings afterwards. And I believe I've had quite a few people who've been at the Groundlings. There's also extremely competitive nature. I think the Groundlings or maybe another improv. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, get to the next level or be a performer, only a certain amount of spots. I think I heard you on another podcast. It might not be the Groundlings, where people kind of stabbing each other in the back to get to that next spot. Do you know what I'm talking about? How do you deal with that? Because that goes against everything that's improv.
Yes. Well, it was interesting because it was improv that brought me to the Groundlings, because I wanted to get a sense of the improv community that I'd had, in college. So I said, okay, fine, I'll go pay for some improv classes to get improv back into my life. But back then, the Groundlings were not just an improv group. They were an improv and sketch comedy group and school. And they had a very specific structure that everyone had to go through the 5 levels of the school in order to then be assessed whether they could join the company.
Yeah.
And they were voted by the actors within the company, which is odd. I mean, that would sort of be like working for a factory and you go through training alongside the other workers, and then the workers decide whether you get hired.
Yeah. And you're paying to do the training.
Right. Yes. But it turned out, because it made sense at the time, because back in the 80s, 90s, in show business, this was in Los Angeles, you did not get paid for improvisation. Because a network, even if they watched a very funny improv comedy show, oh, that was hilarious, but we don't know what the next show is going to be, so we can't pay for it. They wanted what they could look at. And that's, I believe, why the Groundlings moved from an improv workshop into a sketch comedy group. Once you write down your improv character into a sketch, that is material you own and can sell.
Interesting. So I would imagine going to the competitive side, if you are seeing some teammates, realizing that Groundlings, for example, there's been so many people that have had amazing careers coming through the Groundlings, realizing that they can get a career out of it. Couldn't it create a potential hostile environment?
A little bit. I mean, although the Groundlings school was not directly competitive, it was you simply working, like a math class. There was not a limit to how many people could get A's.
Yeah.
It was just everyone who could do all of the work. And it was the same way in these classes, although you were being judged. When you finished the 6 weeks of the class, the teacher would tell you, well, Phil, you didn't quite get everything into your system yet, so you should repeat this class. But if they felt that you had done everything and learned all the skill sets, then they would move you up to the next level class.
Yeah.
Although, once you worked your way up to the top, then it did become competitive, because at the last level, what they called the Sunday company, which was the minor league team before the main company, there was a limitation to who could get voted into the main company, because the main company could only have 30 members.
And that's just
I remember.
Sorry, that's just the time thing of how many slots people can perform. And okay, gotcha.
So when you finish your second year in the Sunday company, if there is only one slot on the main company for that vote, you know that you and the other three great people who've been doing great shows, only one of you is going to get in. Although they did occasionally tweak things. I remember the only time I know this was when I got voted in.
Go on.
Technically, there were 2 slots open, but they voted in 3 of us. Me, a fellow named John Crane, who I had come up through the program with, and an incredible woman named Jennifer Coolidge.
I've heard of her.
Yes, now you have. And apparently the Groundlings company said, we don't want to turn down one of those 3. Let's just put up a, 3rd spot. And somebody just, open it up later.
Did you take that as great confidence, knowing that you got through? What was your feeling like? Because you know that you might not get through and you might be potentially pushed aside and not be part of the school. And you have to go your own way. You lose the community. You lose, maybe you're never going to improv. It can probably create a lot of negativity within oneself if they don't get through, and rightfully or wrongfully. But you've got this community, and knowing that you might be told, this isn't for you, just because there's some people that are really strong. So what was that feeling like when you made it to the main company? Do you remember it?
We felt lucky because we had never heard of them creating a spare spot before, but they did. It's like, oh, well, guys, I guess they must like us. And we all 3 wound up. I think we had to wait a couple of months. One of us had to wait a couple of months before we could officially join. But technically, we all got the votes.
That is so exciting and a real confidence booster. I want to talk about what improv has led from the acting side, but maybe, actually, before we do that, I know you started an extremely popular comedy group called The Black Version, and I believe Gary Anthony Williams, who's been on this podcast, is probably the funniest person I've ever met in my life. Yes. When I go to America, that's going to be the first thing they do. Tell me how that was created and what it's done for you.
Well, The Black Version is for people who are not familiar with it, it is an improv comedy show that we do once a month at the Groundlings Theater, where it is an all African-American cast, and we take a suggestion from the audience of a classic or iconic Hollywood movie, and then we improv the black version of it. Hilarious. And we started this show in 2010. My friend Jordan Black, who actually was a student of mine at the Groundlings,
I see you before
he became my boss. So I definitely taught him well.
And I'll go what it's done for you, but how long did you teach for?
Let's see, I joined the company in 1992, and back at the time, because most of us, I think, took the job as teachers because the Groundlings school needed teachers, to keep the community going and to get, more people into the pool that could eventually become Groundlings. Although some of us only took the job of teaching because that was the only way you could get paid. You didn't get paid for being in the company.
Yeah, crazy.
But teaching would help me make my rent. And I kept teaching until my career started picking up. And actually, no, I officially stopped teaching completely once I started having children, because I realized, no, I can't take 6 weeks off from my family anymore because now I have a family.
Isn't it great just from the earning money side? Because, I'm not sure quite the timeline, but we'll figure it out. you're pursuing acting. I'm not sure how much work's coming through at that stage, and you can actually get paid to do something you like and be with potentially your friends in the community. A great way to keep, and you said you were able to pay your rent. Isn't that just lovely that you had that? Because I heard on another podcast that you didn't want to be a waiter at one stage. And I'm not sure if you ended up being a waiter, and there's no judgment whatsoever, but you could do something like this, which still keeps your like comedy bones and acting bones alive. It's a great way to help people because you would have so many people. In fact, probably most people that have gone as far as you want to pursue it in some form. So I think it's a really nice aspect of it. What also
yes, it was definitely the better day job.
What's the worst day job you've had?
Well, no, there wasn't anything bad about being a waiter. It just felt I don't want to live this cliche because in LA, when you said back in the 90s, I'm an actor. It's like, oh, really? What restaurant do you work at? And 90% of us had to answer. But
yeah, I get it.
Like, I don't want to live that cliche.
Yeah.
And also, I wasn't much of a foodie.
I was a waiter for 3 days, so it wasn't for me. Let's put it there. And I was at very high profile events. I think I hid in the bathroom because there were like 12-hour shifts. I hid in the bathroom for at least 5 hours, and the lady thought that I kept on getting lost. You actually had to leave the facility to go to the bathroom. She called me 3 or 4 times. I was like, I just keep. She goes, are you okay? I'm like, I just keep on getting lost. She's like, okay, next time if you need to go to the bathroom, let me know and I'll help you. And I'm like, you know what? I'm quite happy that she thinks this way of me so I can keep on getting away with it. Also, the plates were so hot that you'd burn your hands. So, yeah, not for me.
Yeah, it was definitely not an easy job.
No, it is definitely, it gave me much more respect than otherwise I would have had. Last thing on the on the black version, I believe you have a famous quote in my mind that you perform every month and it balances you. I would love you to tell me about that. I don't know if you remember it. You said that when you perform, it kind of balances you and keeps you in like your center.
Well, that has to do with the fact that this group is so amazingly talented because, we all have ups and downs. Every time you go to something, it might be your best day, but sometimes you're coming in feeling tired or not as sharp. But I've noticed that even if you're coming off of recovering from the flu and you come do a black version show, it's like, well, I feel weak, I feel tired, I don't feel as funny, but to be on stage with these incredible people makes me feel great. Brilliant. So that's, again, the positive side of community, of being with people. It takes away the pressure of, I've got to do it great, I've got to be the best, no. Even if I don't come up with what I think are all my best jokes, I'm still going to have an enjoyable time tonight just watching Gary improv a rap, or Danielle Gaither or Cedric Yarborough doing a song together that feels like a scene.
You get to see live action of some of the most talented people in the world. They would just lift you out of whatever you're going through at the moment. You could. What a joy! I'm so happy that you found that. And also, I'm working on a theory. I believe that you got essentially a job through improv. You probably got a lot of jobs through improv, but you got Pulp Fiction through improv. And I'm working on this theory. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. You met Quentin Tarantino. I think one of your friends brought him to an improv show and you were improvising with him. And through that, it led to an audition to get Pulp Fiction. Can you tell me a bit more about that? Because that's crazy.
Yes, that's crazy because this is the 30th. No. Yes.
Really?
30th anniversary.
Wow.
Of the movie. Yes. Julia Sweeney, who was a Groundlings before I joined the group. And then she went on to be part of the cast of Saturday Night Live. She had that great drag character, It's Pat. And she was on Saturday Night Live when Harvey Keitel came to host the show, and I believe this was during the promotion of Reservoir Dogs, so Quentin Tarantino came with him to Saturday Night Live, and Julia and Quentin met and became friends. So later, when Julia came back to Los Angeles and came back to the Groundlings, she invited her friend Quentin to come do an improv comedy show. And I was part of the cast and got to perform together with him on stage. And he was very funny, which was unusual for a great movie director, writer. You don't expect these guys to be funny with stuff coming out of their mouths. Like, okay, now I understand why this guy always puts himself in his movies.
That could be for other reasons, but I know what you're saying.
And I found out later that when Quentin was casting the part of Marvin, he remembered me from that improv show and told the casting director, "Oh, there was this guy at the Groundlings. See if you can find him. He might be good for Marvin."
Wild. And you were also kind of auditioning with yourself. What was the other side of it?
Well, because the casting director knew who I was. She had cast me in an episode of a TV show called LA Law a couple of years before that. So the story I heard was she told Quentin, "Well, Quentin, for Marvin, there's an actor I want to bring in named Phil LaMarr. I think he'd be really good." And Quentin's like, okay. But you know what? There's this black guy at the Groundlings who I think would be really great. See if you can find him too.
That's so, you've done that means the role is for you. That's destiny. And so part of my working theory is I assume that you're in your joy, your bliss, you're having fun. It's something that, you love. And then Quentin was able to probably recognize the energy of it. What do you think it was about that performance, whether you're particularly funny or not? What do you feel like you were particularly like in the groove that day? Or you just think he saw something?
Honestly, I don't think that there was any specific improv we did where I, acted like I got my brain blown out. But it may have just been that he had a concept in his mind of what he thought Marvin might look like. It's like, oh, might look like this guy. And then, it's like, well, let's have him come in and do the scene, and so we can be sure he can do the performance. And we did.
Amazing to hear. Part of the working theory is that when you're in your joy, like your love, your bliss, as opposed to when, I'm sure you've done this, everyone else has, when you go for an audition, like, I need this job, you can smell it and sense it. And so by being in whatever state you were in, just trying to play and have fun, you allowed for other people, whether it was Quentin or other people, to recognize, this guy, they can like see you and feel you. So I'm sure you've had those. Yeah.
Well, no, Michael, it may not have been, I don't know. I have to ask Quentin someday. It may have simply been that because Quentin had a concept that there was a connection between Marvin and Jules. That's why this kid was in the back of the car with them. So he probably had this idea that a young black actor would play Marvin. And when we did the improv show at the Groundlings back then, I was the only person of color in the company. So it's not like I won the part over anybody else in the show that night.
I'm not commenting on that. I'm sure you would have known other people as well. But I'm saying more, this is my working theory of how you get jobs, is that when you're in your joy and your love, your grace, whatever you want to call it, you're more easily able to accept or be recognized for opportunities. Whereas if you were in a bad mood or you were being negative, you may have not been able to see it. Or I'm sure you personally, or you've heard of 1,000 of your friends, when you go for a job and you come in like, either you're a bit low energy, which I don't know why one would do that, or if you're super desperate, which we all do, people don't want that. So that's the working theory. Yes, you may have had other variables that helped, but you were able to take advantage of, inverted commas, potential luck. I hope
that was definitely a aspect in my head about auditioning Well, back in the old days when you auditioned in front of people, as opposed to nowadays when you just record yourself on your phone. But because so much of show business is feeling uncontrollable, somebody who is a multi-millionaire showrunner who's put together a fantastic show cannot control whether their show gets canceled. So, and a casting director who brings in 17 great people doesn't know for certain whether the producer or director will like one of them. So everybody has a sense of uncertainty, which to me is why, as a performer, when you bring confidence into the room, that helps. But when you bring fear or sadness or desperation, you help trigger the fear and desperation that these decision makers all have.
Yeah.
So that's why I believe it's always good to come in and feel confident, strong, and put that into, although if the character is weak, you have to play the character weakly. But when you walk in as you, hi Michael, hi. So thank you so much for letting me come in here. I need this job so bad.
Agreed. Very well said. And it's very important to know. And also, actually, talking from the certainty side, I believe that you've probably been a part of so many different pilots. You think you're getting a job, it doesn't go ahead. You think no one tells you that you're actually not getting casted, or you think you're one of three. And anyway, all of this. How do you manage with either the rejection, the miscommunication, or the pilots that don't go ahead? How do you mentally keep on going, moving forward?
Well, it's one of the things that I try to tell people who are going down pursuing, because they say that the tough thing about being an actor is the rejection. No, that is because no one calls you to tell you you didn't get the role. They only call you if they want to give you the role.
Yeah.
So the rejection in show business tends to be less active. But that requires a certain temperament that you have to be able to accept the fact that you will have to apply for 10 jobs before you get one.
That's a good ratio.
That's the average.
Yeah.
And you have to let go of the ones you don't get. Let those other 9 go. Because if you spend all of your time thinking about the jobs you don't get, then you will think of your acting career as a loss.
Oh, so you're flipping the switch to see it as a winner mindset, not a lack of abundance. Very clever. Did you figure that out early?
Yes. Well, I think some people, because I definitely had people who I knew coming up in the show business field who got out, not because of their lack of skill or quality, but because they could not stand not knowing what they would get. This idea of, I don't know if I'm going to make my rent this month. Yeah, but dude, 6 months ago, you got a commercial that made you a ton of money. It's like, but the fact that it's random. Some people do not have the emotional resilience to stand for that. I remember watching some people who, wow, that guy's better than me, but he's deciding, I'm going back to Ohio and I'm going to work in my dad's furniture shop, because they could not take the lack of control. That is a huge part of show business.
It's I feel like, and although I'm not an actor by any means, I feel like this is also a journey of self-awareness and self-growth to be able to thrive for as long as what you've been able to do, because you're learning not only through a character that you're playing or you're reading a script and you get to explore aspects of yourself. It's a way for you to grow and move forward. It's intangible. Whereas me as an accountant, I'm not necessarily growing as a person. That yes, there'd be aspects, but you going through all of this, it's like you merge together in terms of growth. So I'd imagine you also have to be quite self-aware, but also not as self-punishing, which is quite a common trait. So I would assume we all have highs and lows, but I assume that your self-talk is quite strong, especially, not that we're going to compare, especially to your peers, because there's no way that you can be doing this for as long as you without having strong self-talk. Something you think about?
Well, you give yourself the pros and cons emotionally. Because I remember spending my first few years not making a living, not being able to qualify for insurance. So it did not feel like an objective success. But internally, I was doing things I enjoyed doing. So that was the pro. That was the win. It's like, yes, well, I'm not a star. I'm not making big money, but I'm still getting auditions. I'm still getting a chance to be part of shows, part of plays. And that was the benefit to me emotionally.
Brilliant.
And that kept me going long enough. Unlike, like I said, about the people who didn't have the temperament, they tagged out before they could have gotten to a level where the objective benefits came in. You got a series. And okay, now I'm paying my rent for a year.
What a nice feeling. You know what it reminds me of? I'm not sure if you've ever met this actor, Severio Guerra, and he's been on the podcast. I'll just simplify it. He has in my mind, a famous quote where I think he had a near-death experience, and his version of success, and yes, there's other variables, his version of success, which sounds quite similar to you. I think he said, the fact that I get out of bed each day and attempt to be an actor is the success. And I thought that was so brilliant. Yes, we can create all these different variables and there's no judgment. Everyone's got a different definition of success. We've all got bills to pay. But I thought that was such a beautiful mindset, is that I have chosen to do this. I could have been working for my family. I could have been doing this and that, but I love this. I'm going to do it. Do I need to work another job? Maybe. But the success is in the attempt of doing as well. So I would imagine from where you started out to now, your version of success has massively changed and is probably always changing. Do you set goals? Do you have a vision of what success is for you? Do you just go with the flow? Is it something you think about?
Actually, no, there were no goals. It was really just getting up every day and feeling like, am I still going? And like you said, he said, when you feel like I'm still in it, that regardless of whether some big, famous thing happens that day, doesn't matter, you're still in the game. But I think for some people, maybe especially these days, there are people who are pursuing it not for the art or because they enjoy it, but they're looking for fame or money, or I need to get 1 million followers on my social media. I imagine nowadays someone could set a literal numerical goal for themselves. And it's like, darn it, I'm only at 80,000. That sucks. But no, certainly back in the old days, you didn't consider not being a movie star a failure as an actor. At least I didn't. I just, when I got to be part of a production, of a community, that was my win.
That's so beautiful to hear, because we can, and I know we can all be distracted with external things about followers and numbers and all of these things, but out of our control, not necessarily something we can control. And, I like that. It's just about, kind of following your bliss. I'm also wondering, because this would have happened heaps. Actually, I'll give an example. I believe you're working at Mad TV, which I loved, and I think I've had a few members. Mo Collins springs to mind, but I'm sure there's been more.
Yes.
And
did Mad TV air here in Australia?
I saw it later. So yeah, I did watch it. I don't remember it as well, but it would be like on the week. I used to watch it on the weekend every now and then. It wasn't like but yeah, it's very, very funny. And actually, how did you get Mad TV? Was it through your improv background?
Well, again, this is a very odd, series of steps. I did improv comedy in college with this great group of friends. Then I took classes at the Groundlings to try to get improv back in my life. But then the Groundlings taught me to write sketches. And then the Groundling improv show led me into an Oscar-winning movie, but the Groundling classes and company led me into my first regular television series job, because Mad TV was a sketch comedy show. And for the audition, they said, come in, give us a couple of your characters that you've created and a couple of impressions. And that's exactly what I had been doing on stage at the Groundlings Theater. And it was very interesting, because over the years on television, twice I wound up performing on camera the exact same thing with the exact same people I had performed on stage. A woman who was in the Groundlings with me, Mary Shear, she and I got hired on Mad TV. And we got to perform in our third episode the sketch with my wacky UPS guy character that we had done on stage.
That's so great.
And then a couple of years later, they wisely hired Michael McDonald, who I had also been in the Groundlings with. And Michael and I wound up eventually doing this sketch I had done at the Groundlings, a parody of a gay rapper. I don't care about no bitches. I knock boots, not heels. We did that sketch on stage, but we also shot it for Mad TV. So it was interesting to see the steps appear like that. Okay, I'm on TV because of what I learned on stage.
I can also see another very clear theme, and this also goes back to my working theories, that you're able to take advantage of the luck. I think, improv led to, obviously, Pulp Fiction. I think Mad TV led to Futurama, and you applied for Cool Runnings, and you didn't get the role, but I think you worked on a character which is not somewhat, but it's influence for your Futurama character. So if you didn't even audition, you probably think, I didn't get this role. And then through that experience has led to Futurama. You talked about all the other stuff in the sketch comedy to get into improv. Samurai Jack, for example, you worked with, it's not quite the same, but I think you worked with some Japanese people at improv, and that kind of helped you develop the character to some degree. I think with the black version, there was going to be a pilot or a show, and that didn't go ahead, but that led to something else potentially. I don't remember what it is, but we can figure that out. But anyway, you've given so many examples of how one thing may have not necessarily gone to the plan, or you were just testing something and it's led to something. And I think that's remarkable, because it shows that if you learn a skill, it doesn't mean you need to throw it away. It can come back later. So I'm wondering, it sounds like you're aware of this. Is it something that you think about? Because it's pretty wild to hear that.
What, that a skill that you have at one point may not necessarily just go away. It may come back in a different way somewhere down the line. Yeah, well, like I said, because there is so little, there's so much randomness and uncertainty in the show business world. But I think any sort of skill set you have, it's always good to know what your strengths are. Although that doesn't mean you can always use every single one of your strengths in every single opportunity, but you should know what they are.
It also on that, in that you may have not, for example, Cool Runnings. You didn't get the role, you think it's done. And then through that experience, it's led to getting Futurama.
Well, actually, not exactly. Back in the 90s, there weren't, as I said, there weren't as many opportunities for people like this. But when that Cool Runnings movie came up, they didn't just have only people from Caribbean places come and audition. They had anybody who looked like they could be Caribbean come in and audition. So a lot of us, the same guys who were auditioning for gang members for other things, had to work on a Caribbean accent for that thing. But no. Originally, the part I got on Futurama was not originally Jamaican. He was Daxter, a chubby, certified bureaucrat level 36 in the year 3000. But a couple of episodes in, they felt like the accountant type character wasn't interesting enough. So I don't know if Matt Groening came up with the idea or one of the writers, but somebody must have said, what if the bureaucrat was Jamaican? Wouldn't that be funny? Because Matt Groening came up to me and said, Phil, we're thinking if the character is Jamaican, can you do a Jamaican accent? And I'm like, sure.
You just whip one out. It's a hot accent.
No. So the Cool Runnings thing did not get me Futurama, but it kept me from being replaced
exactly
on Futurama.
Because a Jamaican accent.
Like if I had not had to do that, watching a Jimmy Cliff movie to prepare for Cool Runnings, I might not have been able to do what they thought made the character cooler. And that would have been a lack of skill set.
The Jamaican accent, that's the hardest. I remember someone on improv said, hey, aren't you Jamaican? And I'm like, fuck, I was like, that was just not
They said that to you?
Yeah, and I'm like, what the fuck? That's not yes, and you throw me under the bus. I think it was just look of panic for 5 seconds, and I'm like, I've got a sore throat. Or I don't know what I said, but anyway, my point is that you didn't get an experience, and although it didn't necessarily lead to you getting Futurama, the skill or the learning to necessarily apply the accent, you were able to bring back much later. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
On the Futurama side, we can speak about this for ages, so I'll just ask you one or two questions on it. I feel like this and maybe Samurai Jack and some other roles that you've done, this is like the big job. What was, and it's influenced the show that I've been writing. I love it. What is the feeling like each time the show gets cancelled, and then it gets brought back? Because it's a show you love, you put a lot of time and energy in. I'm sure you go through some form of grief process. And then it just keeps on being brought back. Do you remember like each stage? Did it hurt? Are you able to let the characters go? What springs to mind?
Well, because when it started, the idea of shows coming back from cancellation never happened.
Ever.
But like I said before, even somebody at the status level of a Matt Groening, a man whose show basically created the Fox network. Without The Simpsons,
oh wow,
Fox network would not have been real. But the fact that they would then cancel one of his shows, none of us were super crazy. It's like, yeah, well, that's showbiz. And it was interesting when the show did come back, and that gave us a great appreciation of fans. Because we realized that even though, because the network had never put Futurama on after The Simpsons, which is what we expected they would do. It's like you put the two Matt Groening shows together. No, 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 no. We don't care about his little redheaded stepchild. But once they canceled the show, they found out that the reruns on Comedy Central had huge ratings, and the DVD sales in stores were going through the roof. So basically, the studio said, oh no, we left money on the table. Get that show back. The fans showed them, we love this show. We will pay for this show. So that means we will watch this show. And the executive thinkers could not turn down that success.
It's wild. And I'm sure it would have just been this beautiful moment each time it's brought back. And you're like, because, you know, that character's done a lot for you as well in terms of career, probably confidence.
Yes.
Was it a similar feeling with Samurai Jack when that was brought back?
Well, that was a very different one because it happened during the ending of Samurai Jack was weird because it was a great show at the time. So great, a live action movie producer had come to Genndy Tartakovsky and had him put together a treatment. He wanted to do a live action version of Samurai Jack.
Oh.
But the network, the cable network, decided, nah, we're enough. But that was a time where Cartoon Network was having a lot of problems.
Okay.
The people in charge at that time were thinking, we should do more on-camera stuff like Nickelodeon. I remember hearing from a cartoon producer friend that somebody, one of the execs, was sitting in a room with showrunners and said, well, guys, you know, you're a Cartoons and Beyond, but then we'll show the good stuff, referring to the on-camera. And
wow,
we heard that they had planned to think about changing the name from Cartoon Network.
Whoa.
We don't want people to think we're just about cartoons. But the only reason they didn't was because, no, then we'll have to, it'll cost us millions to have to change all of our paperwork and the signage. But the people running did not like cartoons. So that is part of the reason they allowed Samurai Jack to end, even though it was one of the best shows that they had ever had on a cable network. So, and it wasn't until 13 years later that things came back together with the new executives running it and seeing the work that Genndy Tartakovsky had created since then. He was doing animated features. And then they said, okay, let's come back and finish. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
And so they brought the Samurai Jack series back. He brought it back. And it didn't mess me up. Well, actually, it did a little bit.
Go on.
Because they announced that Samurai Jack was coming back before they reached out in contact to me or my agents.
Really? That seems like
Yes.
a big oversight.
And earlier that year, they had brought back the Powerpuff Girls show and recast all of the lead actors. So that was a little bit scary.
Oh, so you see that and you think they're just moving on without you and not even a conversation. Holy moly.
But then Genndy Tartakovsky said, Phil, no. You are the samurai. Oh, thank you. And he's a genius. I mean, the writer-producers of Futurama, the fact that they're able to come back from the dead 4 times and always maintain the same level of quality, that's not just easy to do, but they do it. And Genndy Tartakovsky did the same thing. Although his approach was incredible. Taking the 12-year gap, he evolved the character and the series. And that final season felt like this is what the show would have become had we gone on for these 13 years.
It'd be such a joy also for him because, the show's ended abruptly for him and he's probably got all these ideas. And now he's probably like in his bed, tossing and turning, having nightmares. I could have done this. And then luckily, new was replaced with old thinking mindset. That's from a screenwriter perspective. Brilliant. I love to hear it. I reckon what we're going to do to wrap up the podcast is to do a quick rapid fire segment. So the first thing that springs to mind, I won't comment on them. You can take as long as you need. There is no pressure. We got quite a lot of fan questions, and the questions that I haven't asked, I'm also going to put them in. So rapid fire question number 1. What did Static Shock do for your confidence and outlook on life?
Actually, Static Shock was a huge step up for me because it was my first time as a lead on a television series. Plus, it was a really great television series. I feel like Static Shock was to Saturday morning American cartoons what Stan Lee's Spider-Man comic was to comic books in the 60s. It brought a sense of heart and realness into this fantasy world.
Oh,
and
okay.
that's why those episodes, if you watch them decades later now, they'll still hold up.
That's rare. What did you learn from working with George Carlin? Did anything surprise you about it?
Well, getting to be on the George Carlin show with someone I had grown up watching as a comedy icon was wonderful. But what surprised me the most was how sweet he was. Because George was one of the most edgy comics. He's known for using the 7 dirty words. But I remember one time we were on set, and in between takes, he brought up a performer that was an inspiration for him back in the 50s. And I said, oh, I've never heard of him. It's like, yeah, he was this guy who would come out there and he would, basically do these monologues that were like jazz, but talking about, his hipster version of these biblical or Shakespeare speeches. It's like, oh, wow. And then the next day, George walks up to me and hands me a cassette tape.
That's so nice.
It's like, hey, Phil, this is the guy I was talking about. I last night I was home and I took my records out and I taped them for you. So somebody at his level who was starring in a show and had probably been there as a producer in the room till 11 p.m., then he went home and did a favor for just some little actor boy. That was so sweet.
I'm putting you on the spot. You don't need to answer this one. What does a conversation between Hermes and Samurai Jack look like?
What would Hermes say to Samurai Jack? It'd probably be something about, where did you get that sword? Is it electric? No, it is magic. How much you charge for magic?
Brilliant. I appreciate that. That was very good. Well, this one's probably the hardest. Who's the best voice actor you've ever worked with?
Wow. The best voice actor I've ever worked with, that is a tough question to answer because I've worked with so many incredible people. People who have blown me away in the booth with them. I mean, I remember being in a session with Mako Iwamatsu during Samurai Jack, and here's this, older Japanese man with a very textured voice and his accent, and who had been a star with his name above the title on a Stephen Sondheim musical on Broadway. And one episode, they cast him as a secondary character other than his wizard evil Aku. And I thought, his voice is so unique. How can you have him do two? And then he didn't change his voice, but he performed the second character completely different than how he performed Aku. And I felt like I had just taken a master class.
Wow.
He taught me voice acting should be called acting voice because the acting comes before the voicing. But brilliant. I've also worked alongside incredible people like Frank Welker, Billy West, Tara Strong, and they've all blown me away. I remember we did an episode of a show called Evil Con Carne where Frank Welker was doing a bear, just bear sounds. And one episode, the director had us improv scenes. And I did something that I knew as an improver was not a good thing to do, where you throw a label at somebody on stage and you know you're making them a challenge. I had my character, Hector Con Carne, describe to the bear, grab those chainsaws and do. But then I heard Frank Welker do the sound of a bear juggling chainsaws. How did he do that? And Billy West, in the first episode of Futurama, I remember standing there watching him do a scene of three characters talking to each other. He did the entire scene by himself.
He is incredible. He was on the podcast, and I think he does Fry, Zoidberg, and the
professor.
The professor. And I told him that because I do voices to annoy my friends, and he put me on the spot. This is my biggest regret in life. And he's like, do some of your voices. And I practiced, and I couldn't do it on the spot to Billy West because here. And so I've been practicing, and I did like a recording. So maybe one day when he next comes up. He's like, no, I'll critique him. Like, I can't do that. And that was my big failure moment. But yeah, they're all phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, and although it was wonderful, again, another masterclass, watching Billy do that. Because when you watch that episode where the professor comes and introduces Fry to Zoidberg, if you don't know it's him, you cannot tell that it is one human being voicing all three characters.
And
there's no way.
And that's what's brilliant is that he did all three voices on the podcast right next to each other that quickly. And so it actually changed. Bear in mind, I'm not a voice actor by any means, so I'm embarrassed bringing this up. But what I've been practicing is I get my friends, or especially my girlfriend, and tell them to close their eyes, and I try and get my voice to sound completely different, and it's working.
Oh, that's funny. Because, Michael, the only time I do that, not in a booth, is because nowadays you get so many spam calls.
Yeah, that's when I do them.
Yeah. It's like if I get a call from a number I don't recognize, I don't go, hi, this is Phil. I pick up, it's like, hello? Who is calling?
The other day, about the spot, I was like, hello, who is this? Oh, sorry, Mummy and Daddy aren't home, but I actually own the house, so thank you very much. That's
a good one. I'm going to try that one next.
That's going to be the promo of the podcast. I got you to say that I can do a voice. Honestly, does that sound like my voice? I don't think it does. That's the one I was practicing the other day. I love doing that one because that is the most. I'll call back like, no, we can talk right now. I want to do it. Don't be ridiculous. Anyway,
that's
definitely the voice you should do when you're not on the podcast, Mike.
I feel like I could only play like a 3-year-old girl doing that one, but who knows? Okay,
but that's great.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Last few. I know you played Aquaman and the Green Lantern. Which character would win in a fight?
Ooh. That's a tough one. Well, which is more powerful, water or willpower? I think on Earth, it would be Aquaman. But in space, I would. Well, as long as I don't have one of those Green Lantern rings that can't affect things that are yellow.
I saw the recent Green Lantern. What's the Power of the Rings, or the yellow one on Netflix? That was
my power.
that changed. Oh my God, that was amazing. Anyway, last two questions. Any advice you'd like to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so? Did I say that too quickly?
Wait, people who want to try something different, what?
Or new?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said on you.
That as well.
Yeah, my advice is don't try anything different on me. Advice to give to people trying something different or new?
Yep.
Seek out information, but from perspectives. Don't just Google. Try to talk to people who are in this new realm, because you can just get a lot of information, but it's much better to hear it from the perspective of someone who experiences it, so that way you can tell how that information will affect you. Because when you talk to your grumpy friend about working out of this company, oh, well, he always hates it when people talk things too much, but I don't, so I'll like that. But he's like, yeah, they're always rambling. Like, okay, good. I'll come in there ready to ramble. It gives you information you can use. Whereas if you just Google it, it just gives you, the objective material, not the subjective.
Great.
And the subjective material is better information for starting something new.
I agree. Very good advice. Before we go and I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you, what is the one question I should have asked you?
I think you asked me all 10 questions. Well, 200.
Great. Anything that springs to mind, or you happy?
Yeah. No, I don't think there is any one question.
Cool. Before we go, how can people follow you and keep up to date with you?
Well, I am trying to get better at social media, because for someone my age, it's very, non-instinctive. But I am on.
Me.
Yeah. Oh, really? I'm on Instagram and TikTok as LaMarr. So it's 2 L's in the middle, 2 R's on the end. And anybody who spells it differently, that's a fake account.
And you're also on Cameo, I believe, as well. And you've got a website.
Yes.
We'll put all of that in the episode notes below so people can check it out. Thank you so much. This was amazing. I've been looking forward to this for a while. You're very inspiring, empowering. I love your playful and fun energy. And yeah, this was a real treat. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And it's so wonderful to be able to do this down under.
I love how, despite limited opportunities and old school thinking, Phil put these externals to the side and walked his own true path. Despite the awareness that the odds were stacked against him, he still pushed ahead, following his love of the craft, knowing that this would ultimately bring him great happiness and fulfillment. I love how he says, it's worth trying, even if I can't make a living, it's worth it. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. The trick to life is to have the courage to walk down the path that lights up in your heart. Atticus. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.